Welcome back to Outdoor Adventure Training. My name is Mikey Bell, and today we're going to be talking about some challenges that many of our clients and online audience face, and that is training for outdoor adventures when you don't have access to trails and mountains. We see a lot of people on our social media that say you don't need to train for hiking or backpacking, and while that might be true for a select few that are lucky enough to live in mountainous environments where hiking on a daily basis is a reality, for most people, it is not true, especially those that live in flatlands or cities or just don't have the time and energy or resources to get out on the trails as often as they would like. So this video is going to serve as a guide to provide you some tools and resources so you can train effectively for any adventure no matter where you are in the world. This video is summarizing a very detailed blog post that I wrote that you can find on our website. I'll leave a link to that in the description below. And as you go through this video, if you're feeling lost and you feel like you need more structured training and accountability in your life, check out our Backpackers Bootcamp. This is an amazing resource for backpackers and hikers to build strength and stability, cardiovascular endurance, and all the things that we're going to be talking about today when you don't have access to get after it as much as you might like. We do offer a 7-day free trial on all of our training programs, and if you have any questions at all, don't hesitate to book a consultation with me. This conversation is going to cover 3 main topics, starting with cardiovascular efficiency. We'll dive into aerobic and anaerobic fitness. We're also going to talk about uphill performance, the muscle groups you need, and how to train effectively to move uphill with some degree of ease. And of course, what goes up must come down. So we're going to talk about downhill endurance and making sure that you have the strength you need, not to just get up, but to get back down the mountain. Cardiovascular training can be a very complex topic, and we can get way into the weeds with heart rate training zones, and we do have a whole video on that. Check that out if you need more guidance with that. We're going to try to keep it as simple and as relatable as possible in this video. That said, I would be doing you a disservice to not at least touch on the various heart rate training zones. Essentially, these 5 zones are defined as some percentage of your heart rate maximum, which this entire discussion is irrelevant if you can't define your heart rate max. So you can use a simple equation of 220 minus your age to get a ballpark idea. As you advance in your training, it might be worth doing a heart rate drift test, which I'll leave a link to in the description below, to get a really accurate idea of where your heart rate max is and your aerobic threshold and anaerobic threshold, but that is out of the scope of this conversation. Essentially, we can divide these 5 zones into 2 primary categories: aerobic and anaerobic cardio. Zones 1 and 2 is where we're going to build our strong aerobic base. This is what's going to allow us to move all day long. So if you're training for a big mountaineering objective or a multi-day trek or a big backpacking trip with long miles, we need to have a strong aerobic base, which means you need to log hours in that zone 2. This is where we're still working aerobically, but just at that threshold. You could still have a conversation with your friend while you're training, but you might feel a little bit winded at the end of your sentence. This truly is the sweet spot for building endurance. And if you're going to do one thing to help you prepare for your next adventure, start logging those hours in zone 2. It can feel really tedious. It might not feel like you're doing much, but it's really going to stimulate your cells to build more mitochondria, have more efficiency so you can create more ATP, so you have more energy to do what you love, and it will feel easier. On the other side, we have anaerobic fitness. These are these higher heart rate zones where you are working harder, and this can be a really nice way to help you prepare for those more challenging climbs, or if you plan on spending extended time at high altitude. To be clear, shorter, harder workouts in zone 3, 4, and 5 do not replace those longer, maybe easier workouts in zone 1 and 2. They work together. They're both working different systems in your cardiovascular system, so you need to train them both. Don't think that you can just hop on the treadmill and crush yourself for 30 minutes and it equals the same as a 3-hour zone 2 effort. It does not. So we truly need to have specific workouts to train both of these. And if you're looking for more resources on how to structure these using intervals and heart rate zones, check out that blog post below. Now, why do we even need cardiovascular training? Well, it's for that uphill performance. Not only does this really challenge our musculoskeletal system to bring our body and maybe our overloaded backpack to wherever we're trying to go, we need our heart and our lungs to work together efficiently so you can still have energy to come back down. One of my favorite tools to get that cardiovascular work in when you don't have access to trails and hills is, of course, on the treadmill. And not just any treadmill, but a treadmill that has an incline. Most treadmills at most gyms will have the ability to adjust the incline, and this is really where it's at for training for that uphill performance. A lot of treadmills can go all the way up to 15% or even more, which is amazing because that will closely mimic the conditions you're going to experience on the trail. The beautiful thing about training on an incline treadmill is we can look at, based on how fast you're going and the percent of grade that you're climbing, your vertical feet per hour. And when we're talking about hiking in the mountains, miles go out the window. A 10-mile hike on flat ground is vastly different from a 10-mile hike with 4,000 feet of elevation gain. So rather than thinking about it of miles per hour, think of it as vertical feet per hour. And we can see here that depending on your pace and depending on your incline percentage, we're going to gain different amounts of vertical feet per hour. So I would highly encourage you to do some research on what objective you're training for, whether that's mountaineering or backpacking or trekking. Look at how many vertical feet per mile you'll be climbing and try to replicate this in your workout so you can show up prepared. Of course, no amount of time on a smooth treadmill in an environment controlled room is going to replace the conditions you might experience on your trek. So a few things to explore. Try not to use your hands. I promise you there will not be a handrail up the mountain you're attempting to climb or in the wilderness that you'll be backpacking through. Keep those arms pumping. Also, throw a backpack on. Yeah, you might get some funky looks from people at the gym, but who really cares? It's 2025. Nobody cares what you're doing in the gym. Bring your loaded backpack, put some weights in it, and hop on the treadmill so you can start building that outdoor specific fitness. The Stairmaster is another amazing tool to really replicate that elevation gain. Of course, the Stairmaster does not measure miles, but again, vertical feet per hour. So we can look at this based on your steps per minute. As you can see, if you're moving at 50 steps per minute, we're gonna gain about 2,000 feet per hour. Now, I have done some Stairmaster workouts leading up to filming this video, and I'll tell you what, gaining 3,000 feet in an hour on a Stairmaster is far easier than 3,000 feet on any trail or mountain I've ever climbed. So take it with a grain of salt and be able to do more than what you anticipate doing on your trek or climb because the Stairmaster is so controlled, it's so rhythmic, the steps are always the same size, you don't have to move in different planes of motion, which is exactly why I recommend mixing up your Stairmaster protocol. You can do crossover steps, you can do side steps, you can adjust the steps per minute and do intervals this way to somewhat simulate the varying terrain you're inevitably going to experience on your hike. Probably goes without saying, but don't cheat. Don't use the handrails unless it's a safety precaution. And again, I encourage you, throw on a backpack, add some resistance. That's really going to level up your uphill fitness. Now, there's only so much we can do as far as building muscular strength on a treadmill and a Stairmaster. And this is where strength training really shines, especially for those that don't have access to build that sport-specific muscular endurance on the trail. There are tons and tons of exercises, and we have many, many workouts on our YouTube channel that I would encourage you to explore to start building some of that muscular endurance for the trail. But I do want to highlight a couple of exercises that will be absolutely key in your success for your next objective. First, and this is very obvious, the step up, but it must be done with correct form. As we're walking uphill, every single step, our back leg is reaching full extension, which challenges and recruits the glutes and hamstrings. So these are the muscle groups we really want to focus on for uphill performance. So when you're doing your step up, really think about engaging those glutes and hamstrings and clearing the hips to get that full extension. And regardless of the leg exercise that you choose, the focus should be posterior chain engagement, glutes and hamstrings, so you can start building that endurance. Other exercises like squats and deadlifts, for example, that do target posterior chain activation might not be as valuable as other exercises like lunges or single leg deadlifts, simply because you're not going to squat and deadlift your way up the mountain. But you could argue that the walking lunge or a single leg Romanian deadlift far more closely mimics trail-specific movement. And of course, no trail is perfectly straight. Be sure to train in different planes of motion. This means moving laterally, side to side, or rotating as you do your step up. All of these little things make a huge difference in building your confidence and resilience for your outdoor adventure. In the words of the American mountaineer, Ed Viesturs, going up is optional, but coming down is mandatory. As a professional mountain guide and backpacking guide, I don't usually worry too much about the ascent. A lot of people will just power through by sheer determination, but I'm always thinking about the hazards on the descent. And usually it's the subjective hazard of the guest or the participant that I'm working with of blowing all of their energy on the climb and not having the juice to get back down safely. Don't let that be you. There are ways to train for that downhill strength and stability so you can descend safely. Now, I have yet to find a Stairmaster that works in reverse or a treadmill that does more than just a couple degrees of descent. So we need to come back to strength training to build up our anterior chain for the descent. So we use the glutes and hamstrings to go up. We use a lot of quad strength to come down, which is why people can blow up on the descents. If they haven't been training their quads effectively, they're gonna burn out really quick. So we need to highlight some exercises that really focus on quadricep activation. My favorite exercise of all time for this, that most closely mimics walking downhill, is the reverse step up. This one really isolates the vastus medialis oblique, which is the primary stabilizer in the quadriceps of the knee. Additionally, any plyometric or eccentric exercise is amazing to help you prepare for the impact that you will inevitably experience on your descent. Compared to walking on flat ground, going uphill puts about 3 times the amount of stress on your knee joint, where coming downhill can put as much as 10 times the amount of stress on your knee joint. So we need to make sure that not just our knee joint, but all the muscles around it are ready to handle that demand, which is where those plyometric movements really come in, making sure you're ready for impact. Yes, hiking and mountaineering can be low impact activities, although I would argue if you're going in the mountains, they're a moderate impact activity, and we need to prepare our mind and body to absorb those forces. So anytime we're hopping around, we're training ourselves to absorb softly and use our natural shock absorption system. So not only you can get down from this climb, but that you're gonna have the energy to hike again tomorrow or plan your next big adventure in months to come. I saved this one for last because I truly think it's the best way, if you live in flatland, to train for the mountains is finding a set of stairs. There are so many stairs in the world. You can find them in your house, in a parking garage, in an office building, or my personal favorite, at a stadium. This is a great way to train because, one, you're getting outside, so you're gonna have a little bit more uncontrolled variables like the weather or the conditions you're on. And two, not only are we getting the uphill fitness, but we also have to come back down. So we can practice a lot of these things, get a lot of repetition. These are usually free resources available to the public, whether it's at a high school or university. These are great ways to mix up your training if you don't have access to hills. I also love the stairs because of the variety that we can implement. We can go up one stair at a time, we can skip a stair, we can work laterally, we can work laterally coming down, we can do hopping, again, plyometrics, so many amazing ways. We can use a backpack, again, to further enhance the training adaptations we're looking for. Do some research. I promise you, wherever you are in the world, you will be able to find a set of stairs. Once you find a set of stairs that you determine as a solid training ground for yourself, you can then identify about how many vertical feet per hour you can climb on those stairs. Ultimately, training for a successful adventure in the mountains without access to mountains takes a lot of creativity and planning. You might need to do some research. You might need to get a gym membership. It will all be worth it when you show up to your adventure prepared. And all of this being said, nothing will ever replace the sport-specific movement of getting out in the trails, not to mention the mental and emotional benefits of getting outside. So regardless of where you are, if you have the opportunity to travel somewhere where there are hills and mountains and get some solid training hours in, even if it's for just one effort before your actual objective, and serve as an assessment to see where you're truly at, so you can go back into the lab and refine your training even more so before your adventure. This is a topic that I could talk about for a long time, but we'll wrap it up. And of course, if you have any questions at all, don't hesitate to reach out. Follow us on Instagram, send us a direct message, shoot me an email, book a consultation. I would love to help you strategize about how to train for your next big adventure, because ultimately, that's what we're all about. We want to provide you with the resources and the tools so you can be the best version of yourself, get the most out of every adventure, and really live life to the fullest. Thank you so much for tuning in today. We'll see you next time at Outdoor Adventure Training.